All right, Rand, I'll be honest with you. I was surprised that I like watching this young man so much because in the fall, he had transferred from Texas to Duke. And the reason he transferred, I understand Arch Manning was there and Quinn Ewers was there at Texas. At Duke, they were okay, but I went back and watched them closely earlier this summer. And Maalik Murphy showed me a little something I didn't know he had. He's only a redshirt junior, 21 years old, 6'5", 230. And I have him as number 9 on my list, just a smidge a razor's edge ahead of John McHere, who we just talked about. And my comp for Maalik was what Joe Milton was supposed to be. Yeah, unless you include that Week 17 game for the Patriots where he played his best football. But what I was hoping to see from Joe Milton in Michigan and Tennessee that we never quite saw consistently. I love his frame in Maalik Murphy. Throws accurately. He trusts his arm because he has an absolute hose. He can throw balls in the tight windows. He does it at all three levels pretty accurately. As I mentioned, the ball sizzles. He plays on time, which I was sort of surprised and impressed by. He'll throw with anticipation, which I always love seeing. He's not going to be a guy that leaves the pocket and uses his legs. He's more of a pocket passer. The bad is that he'll sometimes force throws downfield as if they're predetermined, as if he got something pre-snap that wasn't there post-snap and he just rolled with it. And it seems like he has a couple of bad decisions every game that can come back to bite him. But again, pleasantly surprised with what I saw. What did you think about Maalik Murphy? And I think I got your preliminary rankings here, and you had Maalik behind John McHere, but and just outside the top 10, I think. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I had him, and I just pulled my list up. I had him at number 11 for me, and I had the same exact comp as you did as Joe Milton. And I thought they had similar size. I thought they had similar movement skills and overall passing ability. And this guy does have a very strong arm, but this speaks to more of Joe Milton's arm strength. I think Joe's, his arm was a little bit better. I am interested in seeing how he plays at Oregon State after transferring from Duke. I mean, you can't take away from him that he got 9 wins at Duke, and that says a lot to this young man. But like you said, I think he is athletic. I just don't see him as being a dynamic runner, if that makes sense. I can see he has the mobility to move around the pocket and extend plays, but I don't see him, necessarily as a dynamic runner. You spoke to it. One of my main issues with him was the timing of his turnovers. He had his team in games or with the lead, but his turnovers came at a bad time that allowed the opponent to get back into the game. And so I think that's a part of his game that he really needs to tighten up. And then also just the consistency of the platform that he throws from. Sometimes you can see his base get really narrow, which allows the ball to get away from him or leads to some inaccurate throws. And so, once he tightens those things up, and that'll come with the more he plays, I think he will get better. But I see him right now, just in terms of our summer scouting, seeing what we saw at Duke last year. I see him as a developmental quarterback that has the physical tools and traits to develop and ascend a little bit past that level.
Yeah, no, I think that's right. And again, it was fun to watch because I didn't have much in the way of expectations just based on the snippets I'd seen in the fall. It's funny you mentioned Joe Milton. Let me ask you this, because Joe Milton, I think, might have the top 3 arm in the NFL. Is his arm comparable to Will Levis's? I feel like it might be better than Will Levis's.
Joe Milton's arm is stronger than Will's. Joe has. We rank it in scouting, right? The highest tier you can get in scouting is rare, right? You have rare, you have excellent, you have very good, you have good. That's, then above average is the above the line group. And I personally think Joe Milton has rare arm strength. Haven't seen him throw the ball live, haven't seen him do his what I call trick shot throws in pregame. His arm strength is rare. There are not very many guys that can throw the football throughout the history of the game, the distance of the field and with the power and velocity that Joe Milton has.
Right. And that's what I was thinking, but I wanted to double check. And I mentioned that because our buddy Rick Spielman was beyond angry that they took the Tennessee Pro Day outdoors just because Joe Milton was throwing lasers 85 yards down the field and he keep hitting the roof. They didn't move it outside. He's like, that's never going to happen in a real game. And why are we moving around? And he said the same thing at the combine because, I think Milton had the 45-step drop and was just throwing the ball 80 yards inside the stadium there. So that was fun. But to keep that comp going, could it be a situation where we see someone draft Maalik Murphy as a developmental player and then he has a good preseason, and maybe he plays late in the season if the team he's at isn't very good, and he could parlay that into being traded for as a potential number two. Because I think, to your point, neither Joe nor Maalik are day one ready to start, but you could certainly take advantage of an opportunity and find yourself even in year two with a chance to be that number two. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think a lot of it, I mean, there is a school of thought, excuse me, that comes from some front offices where you draft a quarterback every year. You draft a quarterback every year, and then there's going to, like you said, they're going to play these young guys in the preseason, and then there's going to be, a trade market for them. And then now you are able to get another pick and another shot, at being able to, get a player that's going to be able to contribute for you. So, yeah, I mean, the NFL and where we are now as a league and where these college offenses come from and to where the NFL comes from, I mean, you are lucky to get a quarterback like a Jaden Daniels that could come in day one, be your day one starter, and you just roll. These kids need development. And so why not take a swing on a guy like him who has size, who has physical tools and athletic traits that you can develop over time, and then we'll see where we are 2-3 years from now, and you may have found you a starter in the mid to late rounds.
Yeah, and the other thing to keep in mind, I mentioned it earlier, is that Maalik is only 21. Joe was a little older coming out, and there were some frustrations for me, at least, that I wanted to see more in Michigan before he left there, and I wanted to see more at Tennessee, and it never just quite came together. He was obviously the backup at both places, and that perhaps has something to do with it. But I think we're seeing Maalik makes the most of his opportunities, and there's every reason to think that he could take some strides this fall and maybe make himself a solid day two pick. Because let me ask you this, Ran, when you're looking at day two quarterbacks in particular, Tyler Shough went 40th overall, and he was a little different in that he's 25, soon to be 26, but you're not necessarily drafting that person, especially if we're talking in round three, to be a day one starter. There's some things here they do very well, but with the understanding that maybe they need a year or two of development. Could Maalik Murphy fit into that category?
Yeah, again, I think so. And the thing that the one name that just came up to my brain was, our own Cardale Jones. And he had his 1 year as a starter at Ohio State, won a national championship. But Cardale was a big, physical, talented guy that could throw the ball the length of the field if needed. And when he came out, if I'm not mistaken, I think he was a fourth round pick. And he was the quarterback that they wanted to bring in and work with. And so that's what you do. You take a shot on these quarterbacks who have physical tools and traits to develop and just see where you are. And hopefully you have the program, you have the coaching staff that has a background of developing these guys, and you're able to maximize their talent.
Yeah, and I'll ask you this quickly before we take a break. Will Howard transferred from Kansas State to Ohio State, won that national title. Kyle McCord obviously left Ohio State to go to Syracuse, in part because he wasn't doing everything that Brian Day wanted him to do. There may be some comparisons between Will Howard, who's a pretty good athlete, big arm, 6'5", and Maalik Murphy. Will end up going in the sixth round. And it's not that he played poorly or anything like that. It's just sometimes these quarterbacks get pushed down because they don't check every box. I think ultimately it probably depends on where you end up landing. We saw Will Howard go to the Steelers. So anyway, we'll sort that out. It's going to be fun to watch. I think there's more physical tools with Maalik, and you and I will talk about that as we get through this thing.